It was a cold winter morning in a small town just outside of Chicago. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you question why anyone would choose to live in such a place. Snow had been falling steadily for 3 days, covering everything in a thick white blanket that made the world seem quieter than usual. At the local diner on Main Street, a man in his 60s sat alone by the window. His weathered face told the story of someone who had seen his fair share of hardships. His name was Robert, though everyone in town knew him simply as the grumpy old man from Pine Street. He wasn't cruel, just distant, keeping to himself after losing his wife 5 years ago. The grief had built a wall around him that nobody seemed able to break through. Robert came to the diner every morning at exactly 7:30. He ordered the same thing, black coffee and plain toast, and he barely spoke to anyone beyond what was necessary. The waitresses had learned not to attempt small talk. He would leave a perfectly calculated tip, never a penny more or less than 15%, and then shuffle back to his empty house. On this particular morning, as Robert stared out at the snow-covered street, he noticed something unusual. A young girl, no more than 12 years old, was sitting alone on a bench at the bus stop. She wasn't wearing a proper winter coat, just a thin jacket that was clearly meant for milder weather. She hugged herself tightly, trying to keep warm as the snow continued to fall around her. Robert frowned. The school bus had already passed 20 minutes ago, and no city buses ran on this route until noon. Something wasn't right. He watched her for a few minutes, expecting someone to show up, a parent running late perhaps. But nobody came. The girl remained alone, shivering more visibly now. "Refill?" asked the waitress, interrupting his thoughts. "No," Robert replied, his eyes still fixed on the girl outside. "How long has that child been sitting out there?" The waitress glanced out the window. "I noticed her when I started my shift about an hour ago." "Poor thing. Somebody should check on her." Robert nodded slowly. In the past, he would have minded his own business. That's what he'd done for the past 5 years. Keep his head down, avoid getting involved in other people's problems. But something about the girl's solitary figure in the snow stirred something inside him. A memory, perhaps, of his own daughter who had moved across the country after his wife's funeral, unable to bear the heaviness of the empty house. Before he could talk himself out of it, Robert paid his bill, put on his thick winter coat, and stepped outside into the biting cold. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he approached the bus stop. The girl looked up as his shadow fell across her. Her face was streaked with tears that had nearly frozen on her cheeks, and her lips had taken on a worrying bluish tint. "Are you waiting for someone?" Robert asked, his voice gruffer than he intended. The girl shook her head. "I missed the school bus," she said, her voice small and trembling. "And I lost my phone, so I can't call my aunt." "Where are your parents?" Robert asked. The girl looked down at her worn sneakers, now soaked through with snow. "My mom works the night shift at the hospital. She sleeps during the day. My dad..." She trailed off, not finishing the sentence. Robert understood without needing to hear more. He had seen that same look of loss in his own mirror too many times. "You'll catch your death out here," he said. "The diner's warm. Come inside while we figure out what to do." The girl hesitated, clearly remembering warnings about not going anywhere with strangers. "I'm Robert Thompson," he said, sensing her uncertainty. "I've lived on Pine Street for 40 years. You can ask anyone in that diner about me." He pointed back toward the restaurant where several faces were watching curiously through the window. After a moment, the girl nodded and stood up. She was shivering so badly now that she could barely walk. Without thinking, Robert removed his own coat and placed it around her shoulders. It engulfed her small frame completely. "I'm Lily," she said through chattering teeth as they walked toward the diner. Inside, the warmth hit them like a wave. The waitress raised her eyebrows in surprise at the sight of Robert returning with the girl in tow, but quickly recovered and led them to a booth near the heater. "Hot chocolate for the young lady," Robert said. "And soup. Whatever's hot." As Lily warmed up, Robert learned more about her situation. Her mother was raising her alone after her father had died in a construction accident 2 years ago. They had moved to town recently for her mother's job at the hospital. Lily was supposed to stay with a neighbor until it was time for school, but the neighbor had an emergency and left early, assuming Lily would be fine on her own for half an hour. But Lily had fallen back asleep and missed the bus. With no phone and no key to get back into their apartment, she had been sitting at the bus stop for hours, unsure what to do. My aunt was supposed to pick me up after school, she explained, cupping the hot chocolate with both hands. But I don't know her number by heart. Robert nodded, thinking, "What's your mother's name?" "She's at the hospital?" "Elena Vasquez. She's a nurse in the emergency room." Robert pulled out his own phone, an old flip phone he kept only for emergencies. He rarely used it, but today he was glad to have it. He called the hospital and asked for Elena Vasquez. After explaining the situation, he handed the phone to Lily so she could speak to her mother. The relief in the girl's voice was palpable, and Robert felt something shift inside him, a crack in the wall he had built around his heart. Elena couldn't leave her shift, but she gave Robert the phone number for Lily's aunt, who agreed to come pick her up at the diner. While they waited, Robert ordered breakfast for Lily, pancakes with strawberries and whipped cream, and listened as she told him about her new school, her favorite subjects, and the stray cat she'd been feeding behind their apartment building. "You're not really that grumpy," Lily said suddenly, studying his face with the unfiltered honesty only children possess. Robert found himself smiling for what felt like the first time in years. "Don't tell anyone," he said. "I have a reputation to maintain." When Lily's aunt arrived an hour later, full of gratitude and relief, Robert felt an unexpected reluctance to see the girl go. He had grown accustomed to his solitude, had even convinced himself he preferred it. But the brief connection he had made with Lily had awakened something he thought had died along with his wife, the simple human need for connection. "Thank you," Lily said, returning his coat before leaving. "Most people just walked past me today. You're the only one who stopped." Her words stayed with Robert long after she had gone. He remained in the booth ordering another coffee, something he never did, and thought about how many people he had walked past in the last 5 years, how deliberately he had avoided making connections. That evening, instead of heating up a frozen dinner and eating alone in front of the television as he usually did, Robert found himself driving to the hospital. He asked for Elena Vasquez at the front desk and waited nervously in the lobby, a takeout bag from the diner in his hand. When Elena emerged from the elevator, still in her scrubs, her exhaustion was evident on her face, but her eyes lit up with recognition. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "Lily told me everything. I can't thank you enough for helping her today." "Please call me Robert," he said, surprising himself with the invitation to familiarity. "I brought you dinner. I thought you might not have time to eat during your shift." Elena looked at the bag, then back at Robert's face with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "That's incredibly thoughtful of you." "It's nothing," Robert said, feeling unaccustomed warmth spread across his cheeks. "Your daughter is a special girl. You've done a good job with her." They talked for a few minutes in the lobby. Robert learned that Elena was struggling to balance her work schedule with Lily's school hours, especially with no family nearby except for her sister, Lily's aunt, who worked full-time herself. "I used to be a school teacher before I retired," Robert heard himself saying. "If Lily ever needs a place to go after school, or if you need someone to check on her, well, I'm usually just sitting at home reading anyway." The words had come out before he had time to think about them, but as soon as they were spoken, Robert knew he meant them. For 5 years he had been merely existing, going through the motions of life without truly living it. But today, because of a chance encounter with a girl at a bus stop, something had changed. As he drove home through the snowy streets, Robert felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. Tomorrow, he would clean out the spare bedroom that had been gathering dust since his daughter moved away. He would buy groceries, real food, not just the frozen meals he had subsisted on. And he would call his own daughter, who had been trying to reach out to him for years while he pushed her away. One small act of kindness had broken through the ice that had formed around his heart. Robert didn't know what would come next, but for the first time in a long time, he was looking forward to finding out. The following morning, Robert woke up earlier than usual. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of energy that had nothing to do with his daily routine. He looked around his living room with fresh eyes and saw what he had been ignoring: the dust collecting on photo frames, the stack of unopened mail on the coffee table, the general feeling of neglect that had settled over the house since his wife's passing. "This won't do," he muttered to himself. He spent the morning cleaning, throwing away old newspapers and opening windows to let fresh air circulate through rooms that had been closed off for too long. In the spare bedroom, he found boxes of his daughter's childhood things that she had left behind when she moved away. Among them was a collection of books she had loved as a young girl. Adventure stories, mysteries, and fairy tales with colorful covers and dog-eared pages. Robert ran his fingers over the spines of the books, remembering evenings spent reading aloud while his daughter listened with wide-eyed wonder. He set these aside, thinking that perhaps Lily might enjoy them. By noon, he had made considerable progress on the house. He showered, changed into clean clothes, and headed to the grocery store. The cashier, who was used to ringing up his meager purchases of frozen dinners and canned soup, raised her eyebrows at the fresh vegetables, fruit, bread, and cookie ingredients that filled his cart. "Having company, Mr. Thompson?" she asked as she scanned his items. "Maybe," Robert replied, surprising himself with a small smile. After putting away the groceries, Robert picked up his phone and stared at it for a long moment before dialing his daughter's number. It rang several times, and he was about to hang up when a voice answered. "Dad?" The surprise in her voice was unmistakable. He rarely called, and when he did, their conversations were usually brief and strained. "Hello, Catherine," he said, his throat suddenly tight. "How are you?" There was a pause on the other end. I'm good, Dad. Is everything okay? Are you all right?" "I'm fine," he assured her quickly. "I just wanted to call and see how you and the family are doing." The conversation was awkward at first, with long pauses and careful questions. But as they talked, something began to thaw between them. Robert asked about his grandchildren, whom he had seen only in photographs for the past few years. Catherine told him about her job, her husband's recent promotion, and their new house in Seattle. "We have a guest room now," she said tentatively. "If you ever wanted to visit, I'd like that," Robert replied, meaning it. "Maybe in the spring." When they finally hung up after nearly an hour, Robert felt a mixture of emotions: regret for the years of distance he had created, hope for the possibility of reconciliation, and a new determination not to waste whatever time he had left. Later that afternoon, Robert drove to the hospital again. This time he brought a small gift bag containing the books he had found and a batch of chocolate chip cookies he had baked. His wife's recipe that he hadn't made since she died, Elena, was surprised to see him again so soon. She introduced him to a few of her co-workers as the kind man who helped Lily yesterday. Robert felt his face grow warm at the description. He wasn't used to being seen as kind anymore. "I was wondering," he said when they had a moment alone, "if your offer still stands about helping with Lily after school sometimes." Elena's face lit up with relief. "Of course it does. In fact, I was going to call you. I'm struggling to find someone to watch her tomorrow. My sister has an important meeting and I have a 12-hour shift." And so it was arranged. Robert would pick Lily up from school the next day and stay with her at their apartment until Elena got home from work. He was given a spare key, emergency contact numbers, and a list of Lily's allergies and favorite snacks. "I can't thank you enough," Elena said as she walked him to his car. "Lily hasn't stopped talking about you. She says you're her hero." Robert shook his head, embarrassed. "I'm no hero. I just did what anyone would do." "But that's just it," Elena said softly. "Not everyone would have stopped. Most people don't." The next day, Robert waited outside Lily's school feeling oddly nervous. When the final bell rang, children poured out of the building laughing and shouting to one another. He scanned the crowd anxiously until he spotted Lily, her backpack almost as big as she was. Her face broke into a wide smile when she saw him. "Mr. Robert," she called, running over. "Mom said you were picking me up." "Did you bring your car?" "What are we going to do? Can we get ice cream?" Her enthusiasm was contagious, and Robert found himself smiling as he led her to his car. "Your mother left very specific instructions," he said seriously. "Homework first, then a healthy snack, and only then can we discuss ice cream." Lily groaned dramatically but didn't argue. At her apartment, she settled at the kitchen table with her math homework, while Robert prepared apple slices with peanut butter. He helped her work through fractions, impressed by her quick mind and determination. "You're good at explaining things," Lily said. "Were you a teacher or something?" "As a matter of fact, I was," Robert replied. "I taught high school history for almost 40 years. Why did you stop?" Robert hesitated. "I retired. And then my wife got sick, and after she was gone, I didn't much feel like doing anything anymore." Lily considered this with the direct gaze of childhood. "My dad died 2 years ago," she said matter-of-factly. "Mom was really sad for a long time. She would cry in the shower so I wouldn't hear her. But she says it's okay to be sad as long as you don't forget how to be happy too. Out of the mouths of babes, Robert thought, struck by the simple wisdom in her words. They spent the afternoon reading one of the books he had brought over, baking more cookies and eventually, yes, walking to the ice cream shop 2 blocks away. Robert found himself enjoying Lily's company more than he had enjoyed anything in years. Her perspective was refreshing, her questions thought-provoking, and her laughter infectious. When Elena came home, exhausted from her shift, she found them on the couch watching a nature documentary about penguins, with Lily explaining all the facts she knew about Antarctica. "Looks like you two had a good day," Elena said, smiling at the scene. "The best," Lily declared. "Can Mr. Robert come again tomorrow?" Elena looked questioningly at Robert, who nodded. "I'd be happy to," he said. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. Robert would pick Lily up from school 3 days a week when Elena was working. They would do homework, read together, cook simple meals, and sometimes take walks around the neighborhood. Lily introduced him to her friends, proudly explaining that he was her honorary grandfather. The title both touched and troubled Robert. He had real grandchildren whom he barely knew, Catherine's children who lived across the country. One evening after Lily had gone to bed and he was having a cup of tea with Elena in her small kitchen, he confessed this to her. "I've been a terrible father and grandfather," he said, staring into his mug. "After my wife died, I just shut down, pushed everyone away." Elena reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "It's never too late to change that," she said gently. "Trust me, I know something about grief. It can make you forget who you are for a while." Lily mentioned that her father passed away. Robert said, "I'm sorry." Elena nodded, her eyes growing distant. 2 years ago. Heart attack. No warning. One day he was here and the next." She took a deep breath. "Lily was right there when it happened. That's why we moved here, for a fresh start." "You're very strong," Robert said admiringly. Elena gave a small laugh. "Not always. But I try to be for Lily's sake." She studied his face for a moment. "You know, you should call your daughter again. Invite her and her family to visit." The suggestion terrified Robert, but he knew Elena was right. That night he called Catherine again. This time the conversation flowed more easily. He told her about Lily and Elena, about how helping them had helped him begin to find his way back to himself. "I'd like to meet them," Catherine said. "And Dad. The kids ask about you all the time. They have this grandfather they've barely met and they're curious." Robert swallowed hard. "I'd like to know them better too. What if you all came for Thanksgiving? It's only a month away." There was a pause, and for a moment Robert feared he had asked too much too soon. But then Catherine's voice came back warm with emotion. "We'd love that, Dad. Really love that." After they hung up, Robert sat in his now clean living room, looking at family photos he had recently dusted off and put back on display. He picked up one of Catherine as a little girl, sitting on his shoulders at a county fair, both of them laughing. He had forgotten what his own laugh sounded like. The next day, he asked Elena and Lily if they would join him and his family for Thanksgiving dinner. "We wouldn't want to intrude on your family reunion," Elena said hesitantly. "You wouldn't be intruding," Robert insisted. "You and Lily, you've become important to me. You helped me remember who I used to be before grief changed me. I'd like my daughter and her family to meet the people who brought me back to life." Lily, who had been listening to this exchange, threw her arms around Robert's waist. "Does this mean I get to meet your real grandkids?" she asked excitedly. "Yes," Robert said, smiling down at her. "But you should know, you were the first person in a long time to make me feel like I could be a grandfather again." As the days grew shorter and colder, Robert found himself looking forward rather than backward for the first time in years. He had his house to prepare for visitors, meals to plan, and a future to think about that suddenly seemed full of possibilities instead of empty hours to fill, all because he had stopped to help a shivering girl at a bus stop on a snowy morning. All because he had chosen in that moment to break through the ice of his isolation and remember what it meant to care about someone else. As Thanksgiving approached, Robert threw himself into preparations with an energy that surprised even him. He found himself making lists, cleaning forgotten corners of his house and poring over his wife's old recipe cards to plan the perfect meal. The house that had been so quiet for so long would soon be filled with voices, and the thought both excited and terrified him. What if they don't like me? he asked Lily one afternoon as they decorated paper turkeys at her kitchen table. November had brought early snow, and schools had closed for the day. Elena was at work, so Robert had stepped in to watch Lily. Lily looked up from her creation, her hands covered in glitter glue. "Who wouldn't like you?" she asked with the certainty that only children possess. "My grandchildren," Robert admitted. "I haven't really been in their lives. The youngest one, Tommy, was just a baby last time I saw him. He probably doesn't even know who I am." Lily considered this as she carefully added another feather to her turkey. "Well, my dad used to say that it's never too late to do the right thing." "That's what you're doing, right?" "The right thing?" Robert nodded slowly. "I'm trying to." "Then it'll be okay," Lily said simply. "And I'll be there to help. I'm very good with kids, you know, even though I'm still kind of a kid myself." Robert laughed, feeling some of his anxiety ease. "Yes, you are very good with people in general. You certainly helped an old grump like me." The weekend before Thanksgiving, Robert received a phone call from Elena. Her voice sounded tight and stressed. "Robert, I hate to ask this, but is there any chance you could watch Lily overnight? My sister's husband was just taken to the hospital, appendicitis, and she needs me to help with their kids while she's at the hospital with him." "Of course," Robert said without hesitation. "Do you want to drop her off, or should I come pick her up?" That evening, Lily arrived with her backpack and a small overnight bag. She had stayed with Robert during the day many times now, but this would be her first overnight visit. Robert had prepared the spare bedroom, putting fresh sheets on the bed and setting out a few stuffed animals he had found in Catherine's old things. "This was my daughter's room when she was about your age," he told Lily as she explored the space. Lily ran her hand over the bookshelf, examining the titles. Did she like to read too? She loved it. Couldn't get enough stories. Robert picked up a worn copy of Anne of Green Gables from the shelf. This was her favorite. "We read it together 3 times. Could we read some of it?" Lily asked, settling onto the bed. They spent the evening reading, making dinner together, and watching a movie. When it was time for bed, Robert tucked Lily in just as he used to do with Catherine decades ago. "Mr. Robert," Lily said sleepily as he was about to turn off the light, "I'm glad you found me at that bus stop." Robert felt a lump form in his throat. "So am I, sweetheart." "So am I." After she fell asleep, Robert sat in his living room, thinking about how much his life had changed in just a few weeks. From a lonely existence of rigid routines and minimal human contact, he had somehow stumbled into a world full of connections again, and it felt right, like coming home after a long, cold journey. The next morning, Lily helped him rake leaves in the backyard. They made a huge pile, and Robert watched in amusement as Lily took a running jump into the center, sending leaves flying everywhere. For a moment, he remembered Catherine doing the same thing decades ago, her laughter ringing out in the crisp autumn air. "Come on," Lily called, her face flushed with excitement. "You try it." Robert shook his head. "I'm too old for that kind of thing." "No one's too old for fun," Lily insisted, grabbing his hand and tugging. "Please, just once?" Something in her eager expression broke through his reserve. With a dramatic sigh that made Lily giggle, Robert took a few steps back, then ran forward and leaped into the pile of leaves. They exploded around him in a burst of red, orange, and gold, and suddenly he was laughing. A deep, genuine laugh that he hadn't experienced in years. Lily flopped down beside him, both of them now covered in leaves. "See, wasn't that fun?" "Yes," Robert admitted, still chuckling. "Yes, it was." Later, as they were cleaning up the scattered leaves, Robert's phone rang. It was Catherine. "Dad, just checking in about our travel plans. We'll be arriving Wednesday afternoon if that still works for you." "That's perfect," Robert said, watching as Lily attempted to fit as many leaves as possible into a yard waste bag. "I'm looking forward to seeing all of you." There was a pause on the other end. "You sound different," Catherine said finally. "Happier. I am," Robert replied simply. "I've made some new friends who've reminded me how to live again." After hanging up, Robert helped Lily finish with the leaves, then made hot chocolate as a reward for their hard work. They sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around steaming mugs, a comfortable silence between them. "What are your grandkids like?" Lily asked eventually. Robert realized he didn't know as much as he should. "Well, Grace is 10, about your age. She loves science and animals, according to her mother. Alex is 8 and apparently quite the artist. And Tommy is 4 now, full of energy and questions, I'm told." "They sound nice," Lily said. I always wanted brothers and sisters. You'll meet them soon, Robert promised. And I have a feeling you'll all get along just fine. When Elena came to pick up Lily that evening, she looked tired but relieved. Thank you so much, Robert. You're a lifesaver. How is your brother-in-law? He asked, out of surgery and doing well. My sister's staying at the hospital tonight, but she should be able to bring him home tomorrow. Elena smiled as Lily showed her the page they had reached in Anne of Green Gables. Looks like you two had fun. We jumped in leaves, Lily announced proudly. And Mr. Robert laughed so hard he snorted. Elena raised her eyebrows, an amused smile playing on her lips. Did he now? I wish I could have seen that. Robert felt his face grow warm, but he was smiling too. You and Lily are still coming for Thanksgiving, right? Thursday at 2 o'clock? Elena nodded. We wouldn't miss it. Is there anything I can bring? Just yourselves, Robert assured her. The days leading up to Thanksgiving passed in a flurry of activity. Robert cleaned and shopped and cooked, following his wife's recipes that he hadn't touched in years. Occasionally, he would find himself talking to her as if she were there, telling her about Lily and Elena, about Catherine's impending visit, about the changes in his heart. You would have liked them, Mary, he said softly as he rolled out pie crust the way she had taught him. Especially Lily. She reminds me a little of Catherine at that age, so full of life and questions. On Wednesday afternoon, Robert stood nervously at the airport arrival gate, shifting his weight from foot to foot as he waited. When he finally spotted Catherine walking toward him, a tall man beside her and 3 children trailing behind, his heart seemed to skip a beat. Catherine hesitated for just a moment before stepping forward to embrace him. Hi, Dad, she whispered against his shoulder. Katie, he said, using the childhood nickname he hadn't spoken in years. He held her tightly, amazed at how right it felt to have his daughter in his arms again. She pulled back, wiping at her eyes. Dad, this is David, my husband. And these are your grandchildren, Grace, Alex, and Tommy. Robert knelt down to their level, looking into 3 pairs of curious eyes. Hello, he said, his voice gentle. I'm your grandfather. I'm sorry I haven't been around much, but I'm very happy to see you now. Tommy, the youngest, stepped forward without hesitation and put his small hand on Robert's cheek. You have scratchy face, he declared. Everyone laughed. And just like that, the ice was broken. Back at the house, Robert showed them to their rooms, Catherine and David in the master bedroom, Grace in Catherine's old room, temporarily cleared of Lily's overnight things, and the boys in the guest room. While David helped the children settle in, Catherine wandered through the house, touching familiar objects. Noticing changes, you've really fixed the place up, she said, running her hand along the freshly painted hallway. Last time I was here, it was a mess, Robert finished for her. I was a mess. I know that now. Catherine turned to face him. What changed, Dad? In your letters and calls these past few weeks, you seem like the father I remember from before Mom got sick. What happened? Robert led her to the living room and told her about finding Lily at the bus stop, about how helping one child in need had somehow opened a door he'd thought was permanently closed. She needed help, and for some reason on that particular day, I couldn't just walk by, he explained. And then helping her led to meeting her mother, Elena, and suddenly I had people in my life again. People who needed me. It made me realize how much I had cut myself off from everyone, including you and your family. I'm so sorry for that, Katie. Catherine took his hand. I understand grief, Dad. I went through it too. But I'm glad you found your way back, and I can't wait to meet these people who helped make that happen. That night, Robert lay awake in the small den where he'd set up a temporary bed for himself, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of his house full of people. Faint snores, the creak of floorboards as someone visited the bathroom, the soft murmur of Catherine and David talking in the next room. Sounds of family, sounds of life. Tomorrow, Elena and Lily would join them, completing the circle of new and old connections that had brought Robert back from his self-imposed isolation. He wasn't fool enough to think that everything would be perfect, that years of distance could be erased in a single holiday gathering. But it was a beginning, a second chance he never thought he'd have or deserve, all because he had stopped to help a shivering girl at a bus stop. Thanksgiving morning dawned clear and cold, with sunshine glinting off the fresh snow that had fallen overnight. Robert was up before anyone else, moving quietly around the kitchen as he began the day's cooking. The turkey was already prepped. He had done that the night before, following Mary's handwritten instructions to the letter. Now he set about peeling potatoes, chopping vegetables, and mixing the stuffing his wife had made every year for nearly 4 decades. As he worked, memories surfaced like gentle waves. Mary standing at the same counter, her hands dusted with flour. Catherine as a child sitting on a stool and helping by sneaking bits of celery and carrot. Family gatherings where the house rang with laughter and conversation. For the first time, these memories brought more comfort than pain. A small sound made him turn. Tommy, Catherine's youngest, stood in the doorway in dinosaur pajamas, his hair sticking up in all directions. "Hey there, buddy," Robert said softly. "You're up early." "I smelled good things," Tommy explained, rubbing his eyes. "Can I help?" Robert smiled and pulled over a stool. "Sure you can. How about you help me tear this bread for the stuffing?" By the time the rest of the family woke up, Robert and Tommy had formed an efficient little team. Catherine stood in the doorway watching them for a moment, her eyes misty. "Morning, Dad," she said finally. "Looks like you found an assistant chef." "Grandpa's teaching me to cook," Tommy announced proudly. "I'm making stuffing," Robert corrected gently. "And you're doing a great job." Catherine poured herself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. "What time are your friends coming over?" "Around 2, Robert replied. "Elena is working a morning shift at the hospital, but she should be done by then." The morning passed in a whirl of activity. David took the older children outside to build a snowman, while Catherine helped her father in the kitchen. They worked side by side, falling into an easy rhythm that reminded Robert of cooking with Mary. There were still awkward moments, silences that stretched a little too long, but underneath was a current of warmth and forgiveness. "I like what I've heard about Elena and Lily," Catherine said as she rolled out dough for pie crust. "They sound like they've been good for you." Robert nodded, his hands busy mashing potatoes. "They helped me find my way back to myself, back to being the kind of person who notices when others need help. I'd forgotten that part of me for a while." "I remember that part of you," Catherine said quietly. "You were always the first to offer help to neighbors, to students who were struggling. Mom used to say you had the biggest heart of anyone she knew." She paused, her hand stilling on the rolling pin. It hurt when that heart seemed to close after she died, when it seemed like there wasn't room in it for us anymore. Robert set down his potato masher and turned to face his daughter. "I'm so sorry, Katie. When your mother died, I just broke. I didn't know how to live in a world without her. But that was no excuse for shutting you out. You were hurting too." Catherine wiped her hands on a towel and moved to embrace her father. "We both made mistakes. I could have tried harder, been more patient. But that's in the past now. We're here and we're trying, and that's what matters." They were interrupted by the sound of the front door opening, followed by excited children's voices and stomping feet, as David and the kids came in from the cold. Red-cheeked and laughing. "You should see our snowman," Alex announced, pulling off his mittens. "He's huge. And we gave him sticks for arms and rocks for buttons and a carrot nose. And we named him Bob like you, Grandpa," Grace added. "Because he's round and friendly," Robert laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." By 1:30, the house was filled with delicious smells, and the table was set with Mary's best china that Robert had carefully washed after years of disuse. A fire crackled in the fireplace, and soft music played from the old stereo in the corner. At precisely 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Robert smoothed down his shirt and went to answer it. Lily stood on the porch, practically bouncing with excitement, Elena behind her looking lovely in a deep blue dress. "Happy Thanksgiving," Lily exclaimed, throwing her arms around Robert's waist. "Happy Thanksgiving to you too," he replied, hugging her back. Come in. Everyone's excited to meet you." He took their coats and led them into the living room where Catherine and her family waited. Introductions were made all around, and Robert watched with growing happiness as Lily immediately hit it off with Grace and Alex, while Elena fell into easy conversation with Catherine and David. "You have the same eyes as Mr. Robert," Lily told Catherine, studying her face with characteristic directness. Catherine smiled. "And you're exactly as wonderful as my dad described." Tommy, never one to be left out, tugged on Lily's sleeve. "Want to see our snowman? His name is Bob." "I'd love to," Lily replied enthusiastically. Soon all 4 children were bundled up again and outside, running around the yard while the adults watched from the window. They seemed to be getting along well, Elena observed, standing beside Robert. Just like I hoped they would, he replied, his heart full as he watched Lily show the other children how to make snow angels. Your daughter is lovely, Elena added. I can see so much of you in her. Thank you for coming today, Robert said, turning to look at her. For being part of this. I don't think any of this would have happened without you and Lily entering my life. Elena's smile was warm. Some people come into our lives for a reason, don't they? The meal itself was everything Robert had hoped for. The table crowded with dishes, the room filled with conversation and laughter. They pulled crackers that Robert had bought specially, wore paper crowns and told terrible jokes that made everyone groan and giggle. Tommy insisted on sitting next to Grandpa Bob, while Lily settled happily between Grace and Alex, the 3 of them already thick as thieves. When it came time for dessert, Robert brought out 3 pies, apple, pumpkin, and pecan, all made from Mary's recipes. My wife, Catherine's mother, made these pies every Thanksgiving, he explained to Elena and Lily. I wanted to carry on the tradition. They look amazing, Elena said. Did you know that my mom is teaching me to bake too? Lily piped up. She says I'm really good at it, but I can't use the oven by myself yet. Maybe you could help me next time, Robert suggested. Lily's eyes lit up. Really? That would be awesome. As the evening wore on, the adults settled in the living room with coffee while the children played a board game on the floor. Robert looked around at these people, his family, both old and new, and felt a sense of contentment he had thought was lost to him forever. You okay, Dad? Catherine asked softly, noticing his expression. More than okay, he assured her. Just grateful. Later, after Elena and Lily had gone home with promises to visit again soon, and the children had been tucked into bed, Robert and Catherine sat together in the quiet living room, nursing the last of their coffee. Elena seems wonderful, Catherine said, and Lily is just delightful. Robert nodded. They've become very important to me. Catherine gave him a knowing look. Especially Elena, I think. Robert felt his face warm slightly. We're just friends. For now, Catherine said with a small smile. But I see the way you look at her, Dad. It's okay, you know. Mom would want you to be happy. It's too soon, Robert protested. It's been 5 years, Catherine reminded him gently. And from what you've told me, Elena understands loss in a way few people can. You both deserve a second chance at happiness. Robert was quiet for a moment, considering his daughter's words. Maybe, he conceded finally. We'll see. For now, I'm just grateful for her friendship and for yours. Catherine reached over and squeezed his hand. I've missed you, Dad, we all have. I've missed you too, more than I allowed myself to admit. The next few days passed in a blur of family activities. They built more snowmen, went sledding at a nearby hill, baked cookies, and watched holiday movies together. Robert showed his grandchildren around the town, introduced them to his favorite spots, and watched with joy as they formed their own connections with Lily, who came over almost every day. On the last evening before Catherine and her family were due to fly home, they all gathered at Elena's apartment for pizza and games. Robert watched as his 2 worlds merged seamlessly. Catherine and Elena chatting like old friends, David teaching Alex and Tommy a card trick, Grace and Lily giggling over a shared secret. This turned out pretty well, didn't it? Elena said quietly, coming to stand beside him. Better than I could have imagined, Robert agreed. Elena hesitated, then said, Lily and I were thinking, if you wanted to, maybe you could come visit us in Seattle sometime. Catherine mentioned you might be coming out in the spring, and we've been talking about taking a trip west to see the ocean. Robert looked at her in surprise. You'd want to do that? Elena smiled. Very much, if you would. Before he could respond, they were interrupted by Lily calling everyone to the table for a game of charades. But as they joined the others, Robert felt a new sense of possibility opening up before him. A future that suddenly seemed rich with connection and joy. Later that night, as he lay in bed listening once again to the sounds of his house full of people, Robert thought about the twists and turns that life could take. How a simple act of kindness on a cold winter morning had set in motion a chain of events that had brought him back to life, back to his family, and perhaps even toward a new beginning he never expected. Sometimes, he reflected, the cruelest twist of fate, like losing the love of his life, could eventually lead to the most unexpected blessings. If only you kept your heart open enough to receive them. 6 months had passed since that life-changing Thanksgiving. Spring had arrived in full glory, bringing with it green lawns, blooming flowers, and a sense of renewal that matched Robert's own transformation. He stood in his backyard, surveying the changes he had made over the past few weeks. The old wooden bench, which had sat neglected for years, was now sanded and freshly painted. Flower beds that had been choked with weeds were now bursting with color. Tulips, daffodils, and hyacinths that Mary had planted years ago and had somehow survived his neglect. He had even installed a small bird bath and feeder, which had quickly become popular with the local wildlife. "It looks wonderful," said a voice behind him. Robert turned to see Elena walking toward him, a tray with 2 glasses of lemonade in her hands. She had come over to help him prepare for tomorrow's big event, a backyard barbecue to celebrate Catherine and her family's visit. They were flying in for spring break, making good on the plans they had discussed at Thanksgiving. "Think the kids will like it?" Robert asked, accepting a glass gratefully. Elena smiled. "They'll love it. Especially that," she added, nodding toward the corner of the yard where a tire swing now hung from the sturdy branch of an old oak tree. "I'm not sure who's more excited about that. Tommy or Lily?" Robert chuckled. "She helped me test it out yesterday, and I thought she might never leave." Over the past months, Robert's relationship with Elena and Lily had deepened in ways he never could have anticipated. What had begun as a chance encounter had grown into a bond that felt both new and somehow familiar, like coming home to a place he'd never been before. He had continued to help with Lily after school, but now Elena often joined them for dinner afterward. Weekend outings had become a regular occurrence: trips to the local museum, picnics in the park, movie nights with homemade popcorn. Slowly, cautiously, Robert and Elena had begun to explore the connection growing between them. Their first official date had been on Valentine's Day, dinner at a small Italian restaurant downtown. Both had been nervous like teenagers, despite their gray hair and the life experience etched in the lines of their faces. "It's been a long time since I've done this," Elena had confessed over breadsticks and wine. "For me too," Robert had replied, "but I'm glad it's with you." Now, as they sat together on the newly restored bench planning tomorrow's gathering, Robert marveled at how much his life had changed in the span of 6 months. From a man who barely spoke to his neighbors to someone with a full social calendar. From a father estranged from his only child to a grandfather, eagerly awaiting his grandchildren's visit. From a widower who had shut himself away from life to a man cautiously opening his heart to the possibility of new love. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Elena asked, her shoulder warm against his in the cool spring air. "Just thinking about how different everything is now," Robert replied. "How different I am," Elena nodded. "Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? Just when you think you've got it all figured out, everything changes. For the better in this case," Robert said, reaching over to take her hand. It still amazed him how natural this gesture had become, when for years he had avoided human touch altogether. The next morning dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for a family gathering. Robert was up early, setting up tables in the backyard, checking the grill, and making sure everything was ready. By 10 o'clock he was at the airport, waiting anxiously at the arrival gate. This time, when Catherine and her family appeared, there was no hesitation, no awkward pause. Tommy spotted him first and broke into a run, launching himself into Robert's arms with complete trust and affection. "Grandpa," he shouted. "Did you make the swing?" "Mom said you made a swing." Robert laughed, lifting the boy high. "I sure did, buddy. All ready for you to try out." Grace and Alex were close behind, both talking at once about the flight, the games they had played, and their excitement about seeing Lily again. Catherine and David followed more sedately, but their smiles were just as warm. "Dad," Catherine said, embracing him. "You look wonderful." "Happy," David added, shaking Robert's hand. "It suits you." Back at the house, Lily was waiting on the front porch, barely able to contain her excitement. She and Grace immediately fell into conversation as if they had never been apart, while Alex and Tommy made a beeline for the backyard to inspect the tire swing. The day unfolded in a haze of laughter, good food, and sunshine. David took charge of the grill, flipping burgers and hot dogs with expert precision, Elena brought her famous potato salad and a chocolate cake that disappeared within minutes. Neighbors stopped by, invited by Robert, who had recently begun to reconnect with the community around him. In the afternoon, while the adults chatted on the patio, the children organized an elaborate game of hide-and-seek that spanned both the house and yard. Robert watched them dart back and forth, their faces flushed with excitement, their laughter echoing in the air. "They act like they've known each other their whole lives," Catherine observed, coming to stand beside her father. "Children are good at that," Robert replied, "accepting people into their hearts without question." Catherine smiled, something we adults could learn from them. She paused, looking over at Elena, who was helping David at the grill. "Elena seems wonderful, Dad. I'm really happy for you." Robert followed her gaze. "We're taking it slow. We've both been through a lot." "But you're happy?" Robert nodded. "Happier than I thought I could be again." As evening approached, they gathered around a small fire pit in the backyard, roasting marshmallows for s'mores. The children, sticky-faced and content, leaned against the adults, growing sleepy as the stars began to appear overhead. "Mr. Robert," Lily said suddenly, "do you remember that first day? When you found me at the bus stop?" "Of course I do," Robert replied. "How could I forget?" Lily looked thoughtful, her face illuminated by the flickering firelight. "I was really scared that day, not just because I was cold, but because I didn't know what to do. Mom was at work and I didn't have anyone to call. Then you came along." "I almost didn't," Robert admitted. "I almost just kept walking like I always did." "But you didn't," Lily said simply. "You stopped. And now look at all of us." Everyone was quiet for a moment, taking in the truth of her words. How one small decision, one moment of breaking a pattern, had led to all of this, to healing, to connection, to family both old and new. Later that night, after the children were asleep and David and Catherine had retired to their room, Robert and Elena sat alone on the porch swing, gently rocking back and forth in the cool night air. "I have something to tell you," Elena said softly. "I've been offered a permanent position at the hospital. No more night shifts, regular hours, weekends off." "Elena, that's wonderful," Robert exclaimed. "You've been hoping for that for months." She nodded, but there was hesitation in her eyes. "There's something else. My sister called yesterday. Her husband got a job offer in Denver. They're moving in July." Robert felt a twinge of concern. Elena's sister was her main support system, the person who helped most with Lily when Elena was working. "What will you do?" Elena took a deep breath. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about. I've been thinking, maybe it's time for a change for us too. A fresh start." Robert's heart sank. "You're thinking of moving to Denver?" "No," Elena said quickly. "I was thinking of staying right here, but maybe in a different arrangement." She took his hand, her eyes meeting his directly. "Robert, these past months have been incredible. You've become so important to both Lily and me. I know we agreed to take things slow, but sometimes life doesn't give us that luxury." Robert squeezed her hand, encouraging her to continue. "What would you think about us moving in together?" Elena asked. "Not just as roommates, but as a family? Lily already thinks of you as a grandfather figure, and you and well, I think we both know what we mean to each other, even if we've been careful about saying it." Robert was quiet for a long moment, taking in her words, the implication, the possibilities they opened up. At 67, he had never expected to be considering such a step again, and yet it felt right in a way he couldn't deny. "I love you," he said simply. "Both of you. Nothing would make me happier than to share my home with you." Elena's smile was radiant in the moonlight. "We love you too." 2 weeks later, on a sunny Saturday morning, Robert stood in his driveway watching as Elena and Lily pulled up in their car, filled with the first load of their belongings. Catherine and her family, still in town for their vacation, came out to help, along with neighbors who had become friends again. As boxes and bags were passed from hand to hand, as Lily excitedly showed Grace which room would be hers, as Elena organized the kitchen with Catherine's help, Robert stood in the middle of it all, overwhelmed by gratitude. His house, once so empty and silent, now overflowed with life and love. His heart, once closed off by grief, had opened wide enough to embrace not just his old family, but a new one as well, all because of one small decision, one moment of kindness on a cold winter morning. All because he had chosen to stop, to see someone else's need, to reach out a helping hand. That simple act had not only saved a shivering girl at a bus stop, it had saved him too. As if reading his thoughts, Lily appeared at his side, slipping her small hand into his. "Are you happy, Mr. Robert?" she asked, looking up at him with those direct eyes that had first pierced his solitude months ago. Robert smiled down at her, at this unexpected angel who had led him back to life. "Yes," he said, "more than I ever thought possible." And in that moment, surrounded by the family he had lost and the family he had found, Robert knew with absolute certainty that this was true. His story wasn't over after all. In many ways, it was just beginning.